Good afternoon. My name is Bill Lewis. I'm the Assistant Director of the FBI of the Los Angeles Field Office. I appreciate you all coming out here today. I'd like to introduce Dave Bowditch. Dave is the Special Agent in charge of our Counterterrorism Division here in the Los Angeles Field Office, and his office has oversight responsibility for all of our terrorism cases. As you know, 4 men were arrested over the weekend. And before I go over the allegations, I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize the valued partners of our Joint Terrorism Task Force that participated in the case: the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, the Riverside County Police Department, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, the Beaumont Police Department, the Ontario Police Department, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, in the United States Attorney's Office. 3 defendants were arrested in the city of Chino on Friday afternoon, and a 4th defendant was apprehended in Afghanistan on Saturday. All 4 defendants were charged for their roles in a plot to provide material support to terrorists in making arrangements to join al-Qaeda or the Taliban in Afghanistan in order to kill American soldiers and target U.S. interests overseas. A criminal complaint was filed in federal court and unsealed late yesterday that charges the defendants with providing material support to terrorists, knowing or intending that such support was to be used in preparation for and in carrying out a conspiracy to kill, kidnap, maim, or injure persons and damage property in a foreign country, killing or attempting to kill officers and employees of the United States, killing nationals of the United States, conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction outside of the United States, and bombing places of public use and government facilities. The defendants charged in the complaint are Sohail Kabir, a former resident of Pomona and a naturalized U.S. citizen born in Afghanistan; Ralph DeLeon of Ontario, a lawful permanent resident alien born in the Philippines; Miguel Santana, a lawful permanent resident born in Mexico and whose application for citizenship is pending in the United States; and David Ganjoli of Riverside, a U.S. citizen. The complaint alleges that Defendant Kabir introduced defendants DeLeon and Santana to radical and violent doctrine and various extremist materials before traveling abroad, ultimately ending up in Afghanistan, from where he continued to communicate with both individuals and arrange for their travel to join him in Afghanistan. According to the complaint, Kabir told the individuals, or the others, that he had contacts with individuals who had connections to terrorist organizations, including the Taliban and al-Qaeda members. Defendants Santana and DeLeon told a confidential source working for the FBI that they planned to travel to Afghanistan and engage in violent jihad. In addition, the defendants described potential targets for violent attacks, including overseas American military personnel and bases. The complaint alleges that the defendants indicated they were willing to kill what they considered to be the enemy, and even discussed their preferred roles, including being a sniper or working with explosives. In September 2012, DeLeon and Santana recruited Defendant Ganjoli to join them and to travel overseas to commit violent jihad. The defendants were alleged to have made plans to join Defendant Kabir in Afghanistan to attend terrorist training. The complaint alleges they made travel logistics, including flight arrangements, required documentation, and even cover stories. Defendants Santana, DeLeon, and Ganjoli were apprehended on Friday without incident by members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and their initial appearance before a federal magistrate judge was yesterday in Riverside, California. Santana and DeLeon were remanded into federal custody, and Ganjoli's detention hearing was continued until Monday, November 26th. Kabir is in custody in Afghanistan. If convicted, the defendants face a statutory maximum penalty of 15 years in federal prison. The case will be prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office for the Central District of California with assistance from the Counterterrorism Section of the Justice Department's National Security Division. SAC Dave Bowditch and I will now take a few questions.
You mentioned that the arrest happened Friday in Chino. Where in Chino did it happen, and how did that go down?
It was in the area of an apartment complex, and it was a vehicle stop.
Was it one of their apartment complexes?
That I'm not sure of.
Sir, I know you can't get into real detail, and you get a lot of these, more than what you want to discuss.
Understood.
How serious is serious when you're discussing this?
So I think anytime that you have individuals here in the United States that are conspiring to go overseas to commit violent acts against members of the United States military and or any other members, be it civilian contractors or naturalized people that are over there working, we think that that is extremely serious.
This was more than just talk. I mean, it could be a lot of guys just bragging and not really having the means. These people were more than just talk.
Yes, and if you'll refer to the complaint, it actually details out some of the activities they took to further their conspiracy.
And if I may, just one more follow-up. $250,000 to the informant, is that a high amount of money, or is that just the way the price of doing business?
I can't comment on that.
Sir, why U.S. bases, U.S. soldiers, and can you detail some of the language that's laid out in the complaint specifically with Santana?
I'm going to answer the previous question. Yes, David Bowditch. Last name is spelled B as in boy, O-W-D-I-C-H. So can you repeat your question and I'll answer that?
Well, the question I had, sir, is the documents make it pretty clear. It's $250,000 to the informant who was used before, and apparently he was very good. Is that just the price of doing business?
If you look at the time span in the complaint, it'll lay out how much time that $250,000 covered. I think for offenses like this, I would not consider that extraordinary amount of money. The damage that could have been done by these individuals overseas, that complaint will speak for itself as to their intentions, their plans, quite frankly, their capabilities.
How dangerous are they if they're getting ready by playing paintball?
Well, again, it's in the complaint. Not only were they playing paintball, they were also going to the firearms range.
Can you go back to the question about why U.S. soldiers, why U.S. bases, and some of the language connected to Santana that was so alarming?
It was U.S. and coalition soldiers. If you'll review that complaint, that's all in there. They saw this as jihad, and they saw this as their way to push out the aggressors.
Sir, how did you come about the informant? Did you approach that person?
I'm not going to discuss that.
Were they working together at a specific mosque, and if so, which mosque?
We're not going to discuss the mosque as well. That is not where most of them met.
Where did they meet?
They met in a hookah bar.
In L.A.?
All that is in the complaint.
Is it a hookah bar in L.A.?
I don't believe it was in Los Angeles, no.
Are there more involved, or do you have everybody who was connected on that?
What I'm going to say to that is this is a continuing investigation. We are not going to discuss any further subjects at this time.
What can you tell us about what initially put these guys on the Joint Terrorism Task Force radar?
I'm not going to discuss that as well.
Can you say what they did? Were they students? What were their lives prior to this? The three younger ones.
Again, I don't want to go too far beyond the complaint on that. They were all young men. If you notice their ethnicities, they're all from a variety of backgrounds, and they all had one common cause and one common goal.
Why did Kabir serve only a year in the Air Force?
Actually, I believe it was closer to 2. Again, that's not in the complaint. He was in the Air Force for a very short time, and I don't want to talk about why or how he was discharged.
We're talking about the men being from different nationalities. Gojali, I know, is a U.S. citizen from Riverside. What is his nationality? What is his background?
Gojali, I believe, was Vietnamese. You have Filipino, Vietnamese, Mexican, and Afghani.
Was the confidential source also recruited?
Let me tell you right now, I'm not going to discuss the confidential source at all.
Was there a specific traumatic event that triggered this hatred of America?
In their lives, I think there's many factors. Some of those may be laid out they are laid out in the complaint very vaguely, but no, I think it's a series, and essentially, if you look at this, it's a path towards radicalization. If you look at the Anwar al-Awlaki admiration, if you will, their review of his tapes, his messages, his lessons, there was an extensive amount of their admiration for him and, quite frankly, idealizing Anwar al-Awlaki.
For citizens that are scared or surprised that this is happening right in our own communities, sort of what's your message to Southern California?
Our message to them is there is no threat locally based around this case that we are aware of. This was a what we call an OCONUS threat. This was an out of the continental U.S. threat.
But they also said in the complaint, a couple of them, Santana especially, that they would not have been against committing jihad here in the United States if they couldn't do it overseas.
They did, but if you read the complaint, they also said that if they were asked to come back, yes, they would have, and again, we weren't to that point. We'd never allowed it to get to that point. We were on them for quite a while. The agents and the detectives did a tremendous job on this case.
Mexico was mentioned too in the complaint about them going down to Mexico for, I think, for training. Was that a big area down there? I mean, are you working with Mexican authorities at this point about possible training facilities?
I'm not going to discuss that.
Sir, was there any, can you give us a time frame? You mentioned about the informant and the pay. How far back does it go? Can you even want to?
It's laid out in the complaint. I don't want to state it. I believe it was about around 4 years, but I don't want to state it because I could be wrong. It's in the complaint.
And the other question is, did they come close to getting on that plane on Sunday, or you had this thing so wired that there was no chance of them getting on that plane?
Their intent was clear based on all indicia that we have. There was no way they were going to get on that plane.
How big, can we talk about how big a role social media played in this whole investigation? Because there was a lot of communication back and forth, back and forth.
I think if you read the complaint, I'm not going to touch sources and methods, but if you read the complaint, social media was a factor in this case.
How concerning is it that even from the grave, al-Awlaki is among us, still influencing these individuals?
It's very concerning. There's references to al-Awlaki, there's references to Osama bin Laden. That is very concerning for us. But we realize what we're dealing with there.
How close did these men get to joining Al-Qaeda or the Taliban?
I'm not going to comment on the subject overseas at all. On the subjects here, that was fully their intent. They discussed wanting to join the Taliban or the students, and then ultimately graduating to joining Al-Qaeda, who they referred to as the professors.
Is this a marker? Does this tell you about the level of homegrown terrorism?
It's definitely a concern. This was a valid, what we consider an HVE, a valid homegrown violent extremist network. We took this very, very seriously, and all our steps showed that as we went through this case.
And another question, when al-Awlaki was taken out, one of the big concerns by scholars specifically is that he would continue to live on in the internet age, and that even though he is no longer living on the planet, that he still remains a force to contend with. From the law enforcement perspective, is he still as big a threat today as he was?
I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you he is an ever-present. His messages are ever-present in some of the radicalized people.
How at risk do you consider the disenfranchised youth of Southern California, specifically in some of the minority communities?
I don't think we can make that jump from we had one small group of radicalized individuals to this is a great threat. I wouldn't make that jump at all at this point.
But privately, some law enforcement has said that they've been concerned that the terrorist groups could go into some of the gangs. They're already having affiliation and could be easily cultivated into that kind of radical thinking. What is your sense of that?
I think we're getting into hypotheticals there. That's been a concern for many, many years. There's completely different ideologies majority of the time from what I have seen, but I think we should stick to this case and the complaint.
What's next
We'll
with the
take
voters?
a couple of more questions. I'm sorry, excuse me. Just a couple more questions.
What's next? I mean, what happens now?
Well, they will begin to proceed through the adjudication process. Some of the decisions will be theirs and their defense attorneys as they go through.
Can you give us like court dates? I'm sorry, I didn't know if that was on the release.
If you'll contact our media people, we will get those for you.
What's the main lesson learned from all this?
I think the main lesson learned is don't underestimate don't underestimate these groups. They took definitive steps. When you read that complaint, they took very definitive steps to accomplish their plan, and their mission was definitely detrimental and to harm the safety of our troops overseas and quite frankly, coalition forces as well.
This is a how representative network in the Inland Empire. How closely are you looking at the Inland Empire?
Pardon me?
This is an extremist network in the Inland Empire, and I was wondering how closely you're looking at the Inland Empire for further networks of.
Los Angeles the Los Angeles field office has a very large territory. It's about 44,000 square miles. We look at them all the same. In this case, they happen to live, some of them in the Inland Empire. But we are working closely through our Joint Terrorism Task Forces in each region of our area of responsibility to assure that we are carefully looking at people that could be radicalized.
Were they all three in the same vehicle in Chino when they were stopped? They were all three together?
I don't want to discuss the arrest.
Did they have any access to any weapons?
We're not going to discuss Kabir at all.
David, I'll just ask you this. If you hadn't had the confidential informant, where do you think this case would have gone? You think these kids would have succeeded?
That's a hypothetical I can't answer.
How
How would it
representative
have been different? How would it have been different if you hadn't had the confidential source?
Again, a hypothetical, I just don't know the answer. I can tell you we were on them very early on. We have kept very close tabs on these individuals and tried to develop and build our case over time. And ultimately, I think we were successful in preempting them from going over and doing harm to our forces overseas.
So Victoria, I think you had one more question. We'll just take one more question and then
How
we.
representative of this young man using social media is, how representative is this case of the current terrorism threat to the U.S. and your investigations?
I take each case on a case-by-case basis. The FBI and our partners do. I don't think this is, you can compare one to another. This was a very serious case. We took it that way. We put together extraordinary resources to apply to this threat. And I think ultimately the outcome was a success.
What's their demeanor now? Are they cooperative at all?
We're not going to discuss
We'll
that.
try to get the rest of you as much information as we possibly can going forward, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Time, we appreciate it.